Once you have your Clip Studio downloaded, open it up and you will see a workspace that looks something similar to this. This is the default window. I feel like it can be overwhelming to see all these windows open when you really don't need them all. So what I like to do is go ahead and close all the ones that you don't immediately need. So that way we can keep this simple and it not be too overwhelming. So what you do is as soon as you click on an icon, you can just drag it out and hit that little X button. And most of these I don't use. And I feel like for a beginner, you probably shouldn't even worry about them right immediately. So let's just close all of them. If you ever felt like, hey, I did like that one window, or I want to know more about that one window, all you have to do is come up here to Windows and then just open the one you feel like you want to use. So just because you are exiting out doesn't mean it's gone forever. It's still there. You just can't see it right now. So we'll just drag them all out and exit them. Like click that little X in the corner. Oops. Let's blow that back up. Yeah. So again, if you know a faster way to do this, feel free to drop it in the comments for any of you those out there, any of you out there who know how to do this a quicker way. But otherwise, the only way I know how to do it is to drag every single one out and hit the little X button in the corner. So yeah, if there's a faster way, let me know. I have done this way for a long time, so it would save me some time if you knew a faster way. But anyways, so that's pretty much what you have to do is just drag all the ones you don't think you need out. I don't normally keep the brush size because I have a keyboard shortcut for that, so I don't need that. I do want to keep the color window. And again, if you want to, so once you start feeling like, okay, I have a couple that I want to keep, actually just keep them in the center for now, and we'll just do it together. Let's just do it together. Let's just exit out all the ones. I don't use any of these. None of them. I don't use any of them. So let's click out. I mean, I sometimes use the color history, but we don't need it right now. And the sub tool. Okay. So once you feel like you have all of the windows that you think you'll want to keep, and I think these are kind of the main ones, right? The main ones are the sub view, and this just has old art in it. I would go through, maybe I'll exit. I don't know how many images are still saved in here, but let's see. But once you, again, your file won't have these images. They do not come preloaded in Illustrator. These are just, and I don't know how many images are in there, so I'm just going to stop there. I don't know how many images are in there, but your sub view, if you had a reference that you wanted to use, say you were drawing a bus and you Google a bus and you found a bus that you like, you saved it to your desktop. All you would have to do is drag that bad boy from your desktop and drop it in that window, and then you would have your reference photo right in the software, right there waiting for you. Even also too, what you could do is have a bunch of images. You could create a reference sheet and have like 50, 20, 10, 5 different images, whatever you want. Save it out as a JPEG and then drag that JPEG here. And then you could essentially just zoom in on any particular image. And there you go. Your reference photo right there in the software. So always keep sub view open. Color wheel. And what else we got? We got tool property, sub tool, and again, navigator and layer property. All right. Those look good to me. And layers, of course. Always need your layers. So once you feel like you have all the windows open that you would like, then what you do is you just drag one over to the left or right. And once you see red, let go, release it, and it'll snap. I usually do this. I am right-handed, so I usually keep all my windows on the right side. I keep this open, but I really don't click on these. I use keyboard shortcuts for these. So most of anything that I'm actually working with, any window that I'm working with, I always keep on my right side. So for you, if you're left-handed, you might want to keep it on your left. But again, it just minimizes the amount of time you're reaching over your body to get to a particular window. So I normally just keep it to the dominant side, your dominant hand. And then I just arrange these in a way that best fits my workflow. So we're going to put the color palette, the color wheel on the top. We'll put the subtool there. We'll put layer property, probably right above layer property right there. We'll put the tool property right there. Let's minimize that a little bit. Let's shrink that. We'll shrink that. And then like that. And then navigator, I just kind of keep out of the way. Navigator is just whatever is on your canvas, you'll see in that window. That's all that is. So yeah, I minimize that. And I just kind of keep those up there until I need them. So voila. So here's a more organized, clear, less intimidating workspace, I would hope. Again, get all the things you don't need out of the way. And that way you have and again, you also have more screen real estate to work with too. So there's that. So next, so we learned how to set up our workspace. Now let's learn to set up our document. So if you go to File, New, or Control N for my keyboard shortcut folks out there, it'll open up a new a new document window. Here you'll find use of work. These are basically just files that you could work in, right? So your illustration, your webtoon, comic, printing, fanzine, or show all comic settings and animation. Again, if you hover over it, it'll just tell you what it is. The one for a beginner, I would just recommend doing illustration if you're just doing a single image. Illustration, or show all comic settings if you are doing a comic. For my animators, that's the window you would use on the end there, but I'm not going to touch too much on that right now. So let's just start with the illustration. Single image. Single image, you would just set your width. It could be, again, this is just your paper size. What size of the piece of paper do you want to work on? Do you want to work at 8.5 by 11? Is it portrait size orientated, or is it landscape? So 8.5 by 11, 11 by 8, whatever. Whatever you decide, that's where you would put that. You can also change whether you want to work on a full color image, gray, or a monochrome. Once you have, and also too, just so you know, there's also presets here as well if you want to use those. If you want to change the unit of measurement, you could do that here in this window. A lot of these, or I would say some of these you cannot change the unit of measurement in the same way that you can the other. So that's why I always kind of go to either illustration or all settings. Just for whatever reason, if I decide to change the unit of measurement, it's easier to do that. But for all those of you who enjoy comics or creating mangas, this is the window I would recommend. The all settings. Standard comics is not a preset that comes within Clip Studio. That is a preset that I created just based off of, I Googled standard comic sizes in Google. Based on those sizes that I found, I created a document. Just as simple as that. And how you do that is, let's see here, click out of there. This icon just on the right side of this window here, or this box, just click on that. And it says presets, and whatever settings you select here, page resolution, page settings, it'll keep all that information, and you can name it whatever you want, standard illustration size, whatever your comic title is. So that way, if you create multiple volumes or multiple issues, you'll always have that comic preset ready to go. But anything you set here will be captured here, and that's how you set. So that's how I just named it standard comic size, and then kept those settings and clicked OK. And then you'll have it, and it'll just appear in the lower part of the window. All right, so next, canvas is just the size of the paper. So the physical paper that you put, so if you had an actual piece of paper, that's what canvas size is. Canvas size is the actual size of the paper that you're working on. Comic settings, under here, binding finish size, that is the size. If you were to hand that piece of paper or those pages to a printer, that's the size that company is going to chop your comic down to. So that's the finished product. What size is the finished product that you would like? The default border inner size, that is the border around. Like, so for example, like it would be basically be where would your panels start? Like the actual panels of your comic, that border around it, that's what the inner border size is. So you could set it by margin, or you could actually have a page size that, like, I want that inner, and it shows you an example here. So for example, if I were to just take that down to 4, or take that up to 4, that's what it would look like. Or say 4 by 7. Right, so that's the width. Let's blow it up. So width, stay 11. If we wanted it landscape, or if I wanted it back at, or I could do 11 by 17. Whatever you want. That's what the company is going to chop the page down. So if you change the finished size, it'll automatically adjust that piece of paper you're working on, right? And then the border is just whatever you want it to be. So again, you could set it by margin, or you could set it by page. So if you set it by margin, like you could just do 0.25. Oops. Again, whatever you want the margin to be, that is what, again, margin or size, set size, page size, or let's bump it up to 16, bump that up to 10. And let's not offset it. That's what we want it smack dab in the center of the page. But yeah, so that's how you would set that. If you wanted to create your comic based on a particular, if it wasn't a standard comic size, American size, or a manga size, like if you wanted your own size, that's how you would create it. Also, so if you scroll down, the next thing you'll see is the multiple pages. Multiple pages is how many pages are actually in your book, plus the cover pages. So the cover pages are automatically 4 pages, and Clip Studio already includes that. No matter what page count that you have, just make sure, and I believe it'll adjust it for you if you, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so 20 pages would technically be 16 inner pages and 4 of the cover pages. So that's how you would set that. Cover page, you could set a separate resolution than your interior pages. And that's pretty much all you would really need to know to get you started. Again, if you wanted to use these, this is just naming your document, or like if you want to see your title page and the author name on the piece, on the border of the page, it's going to be chopped off. That's what would show. That's where you would put that information. So it would just be your title, a subtitle if you have one, and an author. But that is the bare basics to get you started, is knowing what the canvas portion means, the canvas settings mean, the inner size, and the how to set your pages. If you look at the lower left, you could also go ahead and set whether or not you wanted to record your time lapse. You can. I normally don't set my like automatically unless I know going into it that I want to record from the time I start the document or the drawing to the time I finish. But again, that's completely up to you. But if you don't want to set your record time lapse now in the beginning, let's just go ahead and I'll show you how to do it. So let's just say we'll do a 17 by 11 image. If you wanted to set your time lapse, say you drew something, and it was, I don't know, a sun or something. And you're like, okay, now that I drew that, I only want to record the inking. I didn't want to record the sketching part. So that's why before you click that button in the beginning, I mean, you could always edit it out if you recorded it all. You can always chop it up later. But if you know going into it, I don't want to capture the 5 hour, 2 hour, 30-minute sketch session. I just only want to record the inking. What you would do is go up to File, Time Lapse, record time lapse when you're ready to record it. And then when you were ready to export it, you would just come to, again, File, Time Lapse, Export. And that's how you would export it. So again, we learned how to set up the document, set up the workspace. Now here are a couple tools to get you started. All right, so here on the left side, you'll find your tool panel. When you hover, you'll see the tool name, and if it has a keyboard shortcut already assigned to it. If you wanted to change your keyboard shortcut, you could go to File, Shortcut Settings, and then here you'll find Tools in the drop-down menu. And then if you just select it, click Edit Shortcut, and then you select whatever letter you would want. And then you could just hit OK. But I'm not going to change Z. I'm going to keep that Z. And then also, say if you wanted to change something like your brush size, give your brush size a keyboard shortcut to make your brush size smaller or bigger, you would go to Brush Size, Palette, and then I assign mine Q and W. But you could assign it whatever you want. So that's just another helpful for when you're drawing. You can, instead of going to your brush size like window, you could just use a keyboard shortcut, and that's how you would assign it under Options. And then Tools is for your actual tools. Okay, cancel that. Okay, let's just go over this briefly. The main thing to know about your keyboard, to know about your tools is that each tool has a tool property window where you can adjust the settings for that particular tool. And each tool has a subtool. So under the selection area tool, like here on the left side, keyboard shortcut M, it has additional selection tools. So you have the main tool, and then you have the subtool that are like hidden away within that subtool. So instead of it being all listed out here on the left, because this would have a lot of icons if that was the case, instead they nested tools within tools. So again, if you click on selection area tool, you would see more selection tools within that tool, right? So that's important to note. So let's go back. So again, quick review. All your tools have a property window where you can adjust the settings of that particular tool. And all these tools have a subtool where they have additional tools nested within that tool. All right, so first we have the zoom tool. Move tool is your rotate. Again, just real quickly, just in case we have like people watching that are completely new and you've done mostly traditional art. Zoom tool is the equivalent to stepping back from your art, right, and getting fresh eyes on it. So zoom tool is probably going to be a tool you should, memorize Z keyboard shortcut for, because again, it gives you that zoom in, zoom out, stepping back from your work so you're not, constantly working so close. Move tool, rotate. It also has the hand tool in here with nested within it. But if you just click the space bar, you really don't have to, like if you go to the move tool and say you're still on zoom, let's for example, you're on zoom. If you just hit the space bar, that's the keyboard shortcut for the move tool to move your canvas around. So operation, that tool selects any layer at any time, any like drawing on it. Like, so, okay, let me step back. Okay. So say I make a line on this layer and then I make another line on another layer. With operation right here, that will select whatever you click on, it'll select that tool within that layer. Or not tool, I'm sorry. It'll select that drawing within that layer. So if you have a whole background in one layer and a character in another layer, if you select that character, it's going to move that character. If you select the background, it'll move the background. So you kind of have to be careful with this tool because it'll select items. So you'll accidentally move something and not be aware of it if you're not careful. But similar to this operation tool, which is keyboard shortcut O, is the move tool, which is keyboard shortcut V. Now that only moves whatever layer it's on. Whatever layer you have selected, that's what's going to move. You know, whereas operation, it's going to move. It doesn't matter. It'll just jump layers. Okay. Your selection tool, that is keyboard shortcut M. And again, it has your lasso tool, your ellipse tool, all nested inside there nicely. Then you have your, I don't have a keyboard shortcut for this tool, but Autoselect just selects the tool or selects, whatever item is on that layer. Your eyedrop tool comes in handy, selects additional color. So if you're drawing, you can just select eye and it'll select the color, whatever that icon is, the cursor is hovering over. So it'll select blue, select red. One thing to note about the, about your tools, this is like a game changer now. Listen up. Here we go. I'm going to drop a gem for you. Here we go. So if you are on your brush tool and you're drawing, and you need to select another color, if you just hold down I or just hold down a keyboard shortcut, say I select it, if you release it, you're like take your hand off that key, it'll go back to the previous tool. So it speeds up your process a little bit because it doesn't matter what tool you're on. So say I'm on the selection tool and I just need to eyedrop a color real quick. I hold down I, release it, and then I'm back on my selection tool. So remember that one, it'll help you. All right, moving on. Eyedropper tool and pen tool. So these are the tools you draw with. Again, just like a traditional artist, pen and paper, your drawing instruments are right here in this top three spaces here of this section. So a pen tool, pencil, and brush. Again, each tool has additional tools nested inside. So your pen tool has additional pens, your pencil has additional pens, so on and so forth. One thing to note about your pen tool is you can adjust your brush size. If you do not have a keyboard shortcut for that, you can adjust the opacity, which is basically how transparent the color is that you're drawing with. So if you're drawing with that red, adjusting the brush size there. Take that back down about there. Okay. So if you're drawing with the red, you can keep dropping the opacity, or you can make it darker. So it just depends on, it just creates a more transparent look. Stabilization helps with the line. Like when you throw a line, the lower the number, the more natural. If you have a shaky, it's gonna more than likely show a little more. But if you bump up the stabilization, it'll make it more stable of a line. Let's see. Airbrush is just that, an airbrush. Again, nested inside, there are additional tools. Decoration has some additional tools nested in there. The eraser, something to note about the eraser tool is, and again, I'll go a little deeper with this once we get to layers. And once we start, like, I'm going to do a sketch a little later. But if you go down to vector, let's clear the canvas real quick. So again, raster layer, vector layer. If you go to vector layer and draw a line, and then you have a raster layer, and you draw a line. The difference is if you click on O for operation, you will see the difference that the line that was drawn on the vector layer, which is identified by the cube, raster layers do not have that cube icon. Vector layers have the cube icon. And with the vector, you can adjust the line that you drew, whereas the raster line is just one solid piece. So if you have your eraser tool and you go down to a vector eraser, you can erase pieces of that line. So let's redraw it. Actually, let's redraw it. And if you hit X, keyboard shortcut X, it switches the colors. So if you look at my color panel here, by me hitting X, it just swaps colors, just so you know. Just like that. So, and when that was keyboard shortcut X. So I draw that line. And then say I'm trying to draw a line and I go a little past, right? If I'm on the vector eraser and erase, it'll just cut off that little piece that went too far. Something that's very helpful with the drawn with vector lines or vector layers versus raster layers is that, especially when I'm doing my line art, I tend to go with vector layers just for that very reason. You know, draw a little too far, just knock it off, knock that extra piece off. The blend brush, again, just literally blends your colors together. Your fills selection, your gradient tool creates a gradient. Your figure tool, one key thing to note with the figure tool, if you go within, which is in the direct draw, again, if you hover over it, you'll see direct draw. It has all these line tools, but my favorite tool that comes in handy is the Lasso fill. The Lasso fill is a game changer because it helps speed up your process so much so. Again, if you have a line art on a raster layer, or I mean, again, I prefer vector layers when doing line art. Let's just draw that circle there. Lasso fill, if you hit keyboard shortcut U, let's put the raster layer below. The raster layer is the only layer that the lasso fill will work on. But what it does, it instead of lasso and then filling with a keyboard shortcut or some additional, the lasso fill just automatically does it. So this is like there's no additional keyboard shortcut. It's just filling it. So this comes in handy if you're doing your flats for, my comic book and manga artists out there. If you're flatting your comic, Lasso Fill is definitely the tool you want to be using. The frame border is where you create your frames for your comic. The frame border pen is how you can, create the kind of border that you want. Whatever color you're selected that you're on will be the color of the border. So if you want it to be a black border, you need to change your color to black. That's an important thing to note. But if you want a solid rectangle frame, just switch it to rectangle. And one thing to note is that it'll basically mask that frame. So whatever you draw inside that frame will only exist within that frame. Everything else. But if you hit Shift and select that mask, it'll turn it off and you'll see where those lines actually exist. And again, a little quick tip there. If you hit Control and click within a layer, it'll select it. You'll see the tiny ants dancing around the items or the things that are on that layer. So Control, click within the layer, and then it'll select those items. Also, again, to note, when you select, you'll get these additional options here. Again, if you hover, it'll tell you what these icons do. Fill, and all it is that if you have another color, say for example fill, it'll just fill that. So all these little icons have a different effect, like cropping, all those good things. All right, so let's delete all this. And next we have of that layer. Okay, there we go. Your ruler tools. My favorite tool. So again, one tool to note out of the ruler tool is the perspective. I'm not going to go over all the rulers, but the perspective one is worth noting because if you sketch out a scene, like you're doing your rough sketch and you're like, you know, drawing your buildings and you're trying to get the right perspective, and because again, I mean, when you're sketching, you want to stay loose. You don't really want to start with perspective because it might make your drawing too rigid. So you're drawing your buildings or whatever, you're drawing your things in perspective, you're drawing your objects, all that good stuff. Once you're ready, you're like, okay, I got the sketch that I want. You can click on the ruler tool. U. If you just keep hitting U, it'll just cycle through anything with the U shortcut. So any tool that has a similar or the same keyboard shortcut, if you continue to hit that letter, it'll just cycle through all the tools that have that keyboard shortcut. So with the perspective tool, drop the opacity. I have my, like, say you had your buildings or whatever drawn. If you could just simply recreate it by just lining them up to the lines you had already put down, and then if you just turn off that layer, then you can just create just like that. And if you wanted to turn that off, because sometimes, like, if you go to another layer, it'll still be on. So you could either go to the subtool. Oops. There we go. Or you can just hit Shift and select. It'll just turn it off. And then text tool is self-explanatory, and then a balloon tool is pretty self-explanatory. If you're drawing a comic, that's how you create balloons. One thing to note as well is this last icon here, correct align. You can change the thickness of your lines with that tool. So, or with this tool. So like, and it's kind of like a brush. So if you go narrow or thicken your lines, or make your lines more thin by just selecting the width or thickness that you want to change it to. And once you just draw over it, it'll just keep getting bigger, bigger, bigger. Or if you want to make it more narrow, it'll just shrink, 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 shrink. So very helpful. All right, so that in a nutshell are all of the tools. Just again, a brief overview of those. So I believe that starting with Clip Studio, the key is simplify your workspace. Once you know how to set up your file, simplify your workspace and experiment with the tools. Know what your pen tool, what tools you can draw with, know what layer you want to draw on, and then you're ready to go. So if this video was helpful in any way, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.